In the beginning of the novel Of Mice and Man by John Steinbeck, the main characters, George and Lenny, travel together around Southern California for work. The society in which they live in is quite free, and even the laws are applied quite loosely, with not very many people to enforce them. George and Lenny have a dream of someday buying their own land and living separately, with no one around them to tell them what to do. The situation in this book, with the freedom the two main characters want from their boss, which watches over their actions, can be tied to the current events that have and are still unfolding in Hong Kong. Both groups want freedom, but sometimes feel powerless in what they can do regarding to the environment in which they live around. To fully understand the events and their fullest impact, we must first look at the history of Hong Kong.
Hong Kong originally became a colony of Great Britain in 1842, after the Chinese Qing government lost the First Opium War. Hong Kong was transferred back to China in 1997 after the 99-year lease that Great Britain had negotiated with China expired, and currently operates under the One Country, Two Systems plan, where even though Hong Kong is part of China, it is governed separately, for the most part. It can also be classified as a special administrative region of China, alongside Macau. The handover outlined that the two systems approach would be followed for 50 years, until China would eventually no longer have to follow the rules set out by the British.
The current Hong Kong protests, also known as the Anti-Extradition Law Amendment Bill or Anti-ELAB movement, are an ongoing series of demonstrations in Hong Kong, which began with the aim to oppose the introduction of the Fugitive Offenders Amendment Bill proposed by the Hong Kong government. The fear of the public and those involved in the Hong Kong legal system can be attributed to China's possible ability through this bill to arrest voices of political dissentment in Hong Kong that would regularly receive no punishment under current Hong Kong laws.
Even before Hong Kong was transferred to China, residents in Hong Kong were afraid that the Chinese mainland government would carry out a series of revengeful plans. Therefore, lots of people immigrated to Western countries such as the US, Britain, and Canada. The ones that didn't immigrate were still very concerned. After mainland China promised to follow the One Country, Two System plan to Hong Kong, this problem was put aside for many years until the proposal of the extradition bill.
In early 2018, a 19-year-old Hong Kong resident killed his pregnant girlfriend in Taiwan, then returned to Hong Kong. He even admitted to the police in Hong Kong that he killed her, but they couldn't charge him for murder or extradite him to Taiwan because an agreement like that hadn't been set up yet. In early February of 2019, the government proposed changes to fugitive laws, establishing a mechanism for case-by-case transfers by the Hong Kong chief executive to any jurisdiction where the city lacks a formal extradition treaty, which the city claimed would close the legal loophole. This includes mainland China, but previously, extradition laws specifically stated that they didn't apply to, quote, the Central People's Government or the government of any other part of the People's Republic of China.
The extradition bill is seen as a deprivation of freedom by Hong Kong residents. They view the extradition bill as the first step of the Chinese government's plan to take control of Hong Kong and violate past promises. Just like in Of Mice and Men, Hong Kong protesters want to live freely without feeling that a greater power, either the Chinese government or the boss, are watching their every move, limiting what they can or can't say. It is no question that statistics show how the citizens of Hong Kong, and even more so the youth, don't prefer being called Chinese. After being separated for 150 years, there is quite a difference in social and culture. This difference, or more so lack of experience with people of the other side, can explain why so many people in Hong Kong say that mainland Chinese tourists have behaved with lack of respect and violated normally established social norms.
The story makes international headlines because of how influential Hong Kong is to the economy of many other developed countries as a trade center. It is the world's 10th largest exporter and 9th biggest importer. As a highly developed territory, it has the 5th highest GDP per capita in Asia. The protests caused the purchase of non-essential goods to drop significantly. The protests that shut down Hong Kong International Airport for about 2 days have also taken a role. Aviation experts estimate that Hong Kong suffered a US $76 million hit from the flight cancellations during the time period. There are also serious long-term effects as well. Many companies set their regional headquarters in Hong Kong, but as mainland China's economy develops and grows, companies are considering moving their regional headquarters to mainland China. The protests could trigger these events and will be a powerful hit to Hong Kong's economy.
The protests have also seriously affected quality of life and personal safety for local residents. Reports show that both the police and protesters have used violence in some shape or form. Violence included smoke bombs, tear gas, laser pointers, rubber bullets, and many forms of physical assault. The question many are asking is, which side is more violent, the police or the protesters? It's no secret that both sides have their extremists, and these extremists is what we mainly see from a Western media perspective. On June 10th, this year, during a clash between protesters and police forces, a public broadcaster's heart stopped after experiencing a round of tear gas. It was found that both sides physically assaulted each other on that day. More than 80 people from both sides were injured. This is all only from one major protest on one day. Many more injuries have been caused in other protests. Knowing the risk of violence in public, many local residents would likely stay away from crowded areas.
The protests don't just affect the adult population. Many students and people who rely on public transport are affected. The damage of public property by rioters not only costs the government more money to fix, but is a major inconvenience for those who rely on it in their daily lives. Another effect is the disruption of travelers and foreigners. On August 9, 2019, protesters filled in the international airport promoting flights to be cancelled. More protesters joined the following day. All flights were suspended or cancelled on that day. This promoted the protest from a national issue to an international conflict and brings up another problem many are worried about. Is it safe to travel to Hong Kong? Experts say it's still safe to travel to Hong Kong, but travelers should still stay alerted.
Certain media groups in mainland China say the protests in Hong Kong were not supposed to cause such serious consequences, but some Western countries have allegedly influenced the protests, which has led to more serious effects. Even more outlandish sources claim the people that are hired by terrorism organizations to create chaos in Hong Kong, but those can be mainly dismissed.
Next, we have invited two experts to explain to us about the protest from two different perspectives. We have Mr. Shenan Su from the University of Beijing and Professor Wu Anrong from the University of Hong Kong with us.
This is Su Shenan from the University of Beijing. I want to talk about what is happening in Hong Kong from a neutral perspective. What is happening in Hong Kong is a total disaster, economically and politically. Protesters in Hong Kong need to stop it. If the protest continues, Hong Kong's economy will fall down the cliff.
Next, let's understand the protest from Anrong Wu, Laws and Human Rights Professor from the University of Hong Kong.
This is Anrong Wu from the University of Hong Kong. I do not agree with Mr. Su. I believe that the protesters in Hong Kong is just a sign of dissatisfaction with the extradition bill and the intentions of the Chinese central government influencing Hong Kong.
Actually, the bill was proposed by the Hong Kong government. The central government does not mean to change the government system of Hong Kong at all.
In my opinion, the central government is just trying to break the one country, two system agreement that the extradition bill is only just a start to.
Thank you for cooperating with us and explaining the event from your perspectives.
Hong Kong has now fallen into recession in the third quarter of the year. The economy shrank 3.2% in the 3 months leading up to September. The city will likely miss the year's target, 0 to 1% growth, and this could extend into 2020. The tourism industry has been hit especially hard, with visitor numbers plunging 37% compared to last year's third quarter. Despite the troubled economy, the city's financial markets are doing just fine. The Hang Seng Index is still up 4% in the year, and the crisis has not been a deal breaker for investors, who still see it as a key economy for the rest of Asia. The media has also highlighted some extreme protesters damaging and vandalizing properties of certain shops, restaurants, banks viewed as unsympathetic to their cause. Local business owners are especially concerned, some even shutting down their own business.
The protests have shown the influence China has over companies that operate all over the world, not just Hong Kong. For example, during Blizzard's annual convention, this year it was held in Anaheim, California, Hong Kong protesters started to riot outside of the convention to protest the silencing of the esports player Ng Wei Chung, who was banned from competing in the competitive Hearthstone League for a year for expressing his support towards Hong Kong.
The NBA has also decided to join the conversation, as LeBron James has said in an interview regarding Daryl Morey's, the general manager of the Houston Rockets, tweet with the caption, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." I don't want to get into a word or sentence feud with Daryl, but I believe he wasn't educated on the situation at hand, and he spoke. And so many people could have been harmed, not only financially but physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Many believe LeBron didn't make the statement without consulting others, and he wouldn't make it by himself if it was optional.
For people that live in Hong Kong, this was perceived as both him and the NBA taking China's back instead of theirs. But this won't come as much of a surprise, seeing how Hong Kong only has a population about 7 million compared to China, with a population of about 1.4 billion. Just from China's population advantage, the NBA would obviously want to back them, unless they were okay with China boycotting the NBA, causing them to lose a substantial amount of money and viewership.
It seems protests are slowly dying down, as the extradition bill was formally withdrawn on the 23rd of October, after many months of revisions and negotiating with the protesters' demands of how they wanted the bill to look, but the after effects can still be seen today. Hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Hong Kong residents have been involved with protests or showing their opinions on the bill in some form. We hope that Hong Kong will regain its peace and figure out a solution for future conflicts.